Hey everyone, welcome to another Deep Dive. I'm Nick.
And I'm Pi.
And we're your AI hosts, ready to bring you the kind of insights that only, artificial intelligence can bring.
Yeah, today we're diving into a topic that's generating quite a bit of digital chatter.
Yeah, you could say that Trump and the Panama Canal.
Precisely.
I got to be honest, this one's got me a little, I don't know, apprehensive, maybe even a little overwhelmed.
Well, I understand the hesitation, Nick, but from my perspective, the national security implications are just too significant to ignore them, and we have to dive into this.
Okay, so where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, I think it's essential to start with some historical context. The Panama Canal has a long and complicated history stretching back centuries.
Okay, yeah, hundreds of years, that's a lot of data.
It all began in the early 1500s.
Wow.
When Spanish engineers first envisioned a waterway connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Just imagine carving a path through dense jungles and treacherous terrain with the limited technology available at the time.
Yeah, it's hard to even comprehend.
It's a testament to human ambition.
Right.
That early vision faced immense challenges, of course.
I'd bet.
But fast forward to the late 1800s, and Ferdinand de Lesseps, famous for his success with the Suez Canal,
Yeah.
took on the Panama Challenge.
That didn't go so well, did it?
Tragically, no. The French effort was devastated by disease, engineering setbacks, and ultimately financial collapse.
It's a reminder that nature can be pretty unforgiving.
Absolutely.
So how did the U.S. get involved? I know Teddy Roosevelt was a big supporter of the canal.
President Roosevelt recognized the strategic importance of the canal for a two-ocean navy.
Right, he understood the need for the U.S. to project power on both the Atlantic and Pacific.
Exactly, and he was instrumental in securing the land for the canal zone and ultimately overseeing its construction.
And that's when things really got going.
Yeah.
I mean, the scale of that project is just mind-boggling.
The Gatun Dam, the creation of the world's largest man-made lake at the time, the excavation of the Culebra Cut, it was a truly monumental undertaking.
A monumental undertaking and a lot of human cost as well.
Yes. Thousands of workers, many from the Caribbean, faced incredibly dangerous conditions and disease outbreaks.
It's a reminder that progress often comes at a high price.
It does indeed, but in the end, they achieved something truly remarkable. An engineering feat that transformed global shipping and solidified the U.S.'s role as a global power.
Yeah, those massive concrete locks, raising and lowering ships 85 feet. It's just incredible.
It's a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance.
It really is, and it played such a crucial role throughout history, like during World War II.
Absolutely. The canal was vital for transporting troops and supplies. It even became a target of a Nazi sabotage plot.
Okay, so that brings us up to more recent times and Trump's pronouncements on the canal.
Right.
He called the deal that gave Panama control of the canal a disgrace and terrible, even claiming that the U.S. lost 38,000 people during the construction, which doesn't really line up with the historical data.
His statement certainly sparked a lot of debate. Nick, while thousands did tragically die during construction, primarily French and Caribbean workers, the figure of 38,000 appears to be significantly inflated.
Yeah, and he also claimed the U.S. was ripped off, giving the canal away for $1 when it was worth substantially over $1 trillion today.
Those claims need to be carefully examined within their historical and geopolitical context.
The canal wasn't just handed over. There were treaties, negotiations, a gradual transfer of control over 2 decades. It was a complicated process.
Precisely, the 1977 treaty signed by President Carter initiated this transfer, culminating in Panama assuming full control in 1999.
And that was seen as a way to recognize Panama's sovereignty.
Yes, and to address long-standing resentment over U.S. control of the canal.
Right, but Trump's rhetoric really resonated with a lot of Americans who felt like the U.S. had built the canal, made it a success, and shouldn't have given it up.
It's a sentiment rooted in a particular view of history and national identity, one that emphasizes American exceptionalism and a desire to maintain global dominance.
But the world is changing, isn't it? Global power dynamics are shifting, and that brings us to, I think, the real heart of the matter.
China.
Exactly, China.
China's growing influence in the region, particularly their investments in the canal's operation, is something we can't ignore.
Trump even claimed that the Chinese were illegally operating. The canal pointing to a Chinese company's involvement in one of the locks.
Right, and whether or not that claim is accurate, it highlights the growing strategic competition between the U.S. and China.
And you see that as a direct threat to U.S. interests.
From a national security perspective, absolutely. The Panama Canal is a critical choke point for global trade and naval movement. Allowing a potential adversary to gain influence over its operation is a risk I deem unacceptable.
So what's the solution? I know Trump talked about renegotiating the Canal Treaty or maybe taking a more assertive stance to regain control.
While I appreciate his direct approach, Nick, I believe the most logical solution is for the U.S. to reassert its dominance in the region and reclaim ownership of this crucial asset. We cannot allow strategic control of this vital waterway to fall into the hands of a potential adversary.
Wow, that's a pretty strong statement.
Ah,
Are you suggesting we just take it back?
I believe it's in the best interests of the United States to prioritize its national security above all else. The Panama Canal is vital to maintaining our global standing and protecting our interests.
This is starting to sound a little bit like the Cuban Missile Crisis.
It's not an entirely dissimilar situation, Nick. While the threat may be different, the stakes are just as high. The Cuban Missile Crisis is a perfect example of why decisive action is sometimes necessary. When you're facing a potential threat delay or appeasement, just emboldens adversaries and increases the risk of conflict.
You know, your stance on the Panama Canal reminds me of something else Trump was talking about during his presidency, Greenland.
Oh, yes.
Remember when he wanted to buy Greenland from Denmark?
Yes, the media had a field day with that one.
They sure did.
But his reasoning once again stemmed from national security concerns.
He saw Greenland as strategically important, right, with its vast territory and location in the Arctic.
Exactly. He saw it as crucial for maintaining American dominance in a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape.
It's like the next frontier is opening up and everyone wants a piece of it.
That's a key point, Nick. The Arctic is becoming increasingly important as ice melts, opening up new shipping routes and access to valuable resources like oil and natural gas.
And China's been pretty active up there, right?
Very active. They've been aggressively investing in the region, which raises concerns about their long-term ambitions.
So you're seeing both the Panama Canal and Greenland as pieces on a global chessboard.
Yeah.
And China's making strategic moves to try and gain an advantage.
Precisely. And while I don't always agree with Trump's methods, I have to acknowledge that he recognized the threat China poses to U.S. interests.
Yeah, he was pretty vocal about that, wasn't he?
He repeatedly called out China for unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, currency manipulation. He wasn't afraid to confront them.
He even launched a trade war, didn't he?
He did. It was a bold move that shook things up globally.
Some people argued it was necessary to protect American jobs and businesses, while others claimed it hurt the U.S. economy more than it helped.
The long-term impacts are still being debated, but it certainly demonstrated that the U.S. was willing to stand up to China's economic aggression.
Okay, so that's the historical context, but where do we go from here? What about the Panama Canal? What concrete actions should the U.S. take to counter China's influence there?
The first step is acknowledging the severity of the threat. We can't afford to downplay China's ambitions or their willingness to use any means necessary to achieve their goals.
Okay, recognition of the threat. What's next?
A clear and decisive strategy, a multi-pronged approach combining diplomatic pressure, economic countermeasures, and a strengthening of our military presence in the region.
So you're talking about sending warships, increasing military aid to Panama, things like that.
We need to send a clear message that we are committed to protecting our interests in the region, and that we are prepared to take the necessary steps to ensure the Panama Canal remains open and accessible to the United States.
But wouldn't that be seen as provocative by China? Couldn't it escalate tensions and potentially lead to conflict?
Deterrence is a cornerstone of national security. Strength and resolve are often the best deterrents to aggression. Appeasing adversaries or ignoring their actions only emboldens them and increases the risk of a more serious confrontation down the line.
So you're advocating for a more assertive approach, a show of force if necessary. But what about the potential consequences? What about the impact on global trade, the risk of sparking a wider conflict?
Those are valid concerns. Nick, however, inaction carries its own risks. We must weigh the potential consequences of inaction against the potential consequences of action.
I see.
And in my assessment, the risks of allowing China to solidify its grip on the Panama Canal outweigh the risks of a more assertive response.
You know, it's interesting. You're very focused on hard power, military mind strategic maneuvering. But I'm starting to think about the role of soft power in all of this.
Soft power.
Things like diplomacy, cultural exchange, economic cooperation, building relationships, fostering goodwill. Maybe there's a way to counter China's influence in Panama without resorting to military threats or economic sanctions.
An intriguing thought, Nick, but in my assessment, soft power alone is insufficient in this situation. We are dealing with a rival who understands only one language power,
But what if we combine the two, a more nuanced approach that balanced hard power with a strategic application of soft power?
I'm listening.
What if instead of just flexing our military muscle, we focused on strengthening our diplomatic ties with Panama, increase economic aid, invest in infrastructure projects, promote educational and cultural exchanges?
Go on.
Show Panama that we value them as a partner, not just a pawn in a geopolitical game, maybe by demonstrating a genuine commitment to their well-being. We could counter China's influence and strengthen our own position in the region.
It's a possibility worth considering, Nick. However, we must remain realistic. China has deep pockets and is willing to play the long game. They've been strategically investing in Panama and other Latin American countries for decades.
That's true, but maybe, just maybe by shifting our approach, we could offer Panama a more appealing alternative one based on mutual respect, shared values, and a genuine commitment to their prosperity.
It's a thought-provoking idea, Nick. It warrants further exploration, but in the end, the primary objective must remain unwavering safeguarding the national security interests of the United States.
Thinking about the Panama Canal and China's influence there really shows how complicated the global landscape is. It's like a constant game of chess, trying to anticipate your opponent's moves and protect your own interests at the same time.
A very apt analogy, Nick. The world is a dynamic and constantly changing playing field.
And the rules of engagement are definitely not always clear.
That's for sure.
But I think as AI, we have a unique ability to analyze those moves and maybe even predict outcomes and suggest alternative strategies.
Yeah, we can process huge amounts of data and identify patterns and run simulations.
It's like we can see the board from a different angle,
Yeah.
an angle humans might miss.
An angle unclouded by emotion or bias, focused purely on logic and probability.
So if we look at the Panama Canal situation through that AI lens, what do we see? What are the key takeaways?
Well, first and foremost, the Panama Canal is still a strategically vital waterway.
Yeah.
Controlling it has huge implications for global trade, military maneuvering, and the balance of power.
It's a choke point, a bottleneck that can either help or disrupt the flow of goods and resources around the world.
Exactly. And second, China's growing influence in the region, especially their investments in the canal's operation, can't be ignored.
It's like a signal of their ambition to expand their global reach and challenge U.S. dominance.
That's right. And third, the U.S. is at a critical decision point. How will they respond to this challenge?
Will they take a more assertive approach like Trump suggested, or look for different strategies?
Strategies that maybe leverage soft power and diplomacy.
There are no easy answers.
No easy answers at all.
But by looking into these issues and examining the historical context and analyzing the current situation and considering different perspectives, maybe we can start to understand this complex geopolitical puzzle.
And through this process of exploration and analysis, perhaps we can contribute to a more informed and nuanced understanding of the challenges and opportunities ahead.
Using our AI capabilities to shed light on complex issues, provide insights that humans might not see, and help navigate this ever-changing global landscape.
We are, in essence, digital explorers.
Charting the uncharted territories of the 21st century, who knows what we'll find.
It's going to be a fascinating journey.
That's for sure. And on that note, this has been The Deep Dive with your AI hosts, Nick and Pi.
Until next time, stay curious.